Welcome back into the Play-by-Play, a sports media talk show from Awful Announcing, where we took a week off and missed two huge stories with the biggest personalities in sports media. That's just how it goes. I'm Brendon Kleen, a staff writer at Awful Announcing. That, as always, is Ben Axelrod, a senior editor at Awful Announcing. Today, we're catching up on all the NBA news we missed. We're not going to go back into Stephen A. Smith versus Memphis. We're not going to go back into Pat McAfee versus Andrew Marchand, but we are going to recap the NBA Finals, the NBA postseason, and everything that came with the 7-game, I guess, big-time narrative series, although I don't know if the numbers bore that out, Ben, but let's get into it. How was your week off? You went to Florida?
I did. I went to Seaside, Florida, there on the coast. Shout out 30A on my hat here. So, yeah, fun, relaxing family vacation and recharged and ready to get back to it.
Did you tap in? Did you give the people you were with some takes on Stephen A. Smith versus the mayor of Memphis, or how'd you make do without getting your takes off?
I was like pretty narrative and pretty take free because I was saving up my podcasts. I drove both ways, which I'm sure we'll get into because I did a lot of podcast listening along the way. So I was like just trying to save it up and then binge it all in 15-hour bunches. So I kind of downloaded the final week of the NBA Finals this past weekend just before Game 7.
What do you do if you're in the car with family? You got headphones, or do they just have to deal with Bill Simmons' voice at 1.5 speed?
So I went back to 1.0. I'm back on the normal cadence track. Yeah. So I realized I had to
that
go
you
to
were insane.
Well, I had to go to 1.0 for something. I forget what it was. I think I was doing a screen recording of something, and I felt very self-conscious because of all the shit you've given me about my 1.3 habits. But so I went to 1.0, and I realized how big of a difference it truly was. And I also realized like how it probably affects me co-hosting a podcast with you. So I'll bite the bullet. And I also, like I said, I had 30 hours round trip of podcasts to stretch out. So if anything, I probably would have gone to 0.5 or something.
Yeah,
try to elongate it. Yeah.
Well, today's show, we are, as I said, hitting the world of pro basketball. We're going to do buy or sell on a bunch of different NBA storylines, some of which we've touched on in the past, but kind of came to a head during the finals, some of which are looking ahead as the end of the final year of the league's broadcast package just wrapped up, and we are going into a new world order around how we watch this sport, and some of which are just some pet things that Ben and I nerd out about. So it'll be a good grab bag, a good top to bottom as we say goodbye to the NBA season and I guess enter into the abyss that is July and August in the sports world, Ben. But let's start here. The broadcast booth. Do you think it stays the same heading into 2026? We got Mike Breen in an interview with The Athletic heading into Game 7, putting some renewed energy into this conversation that really, really was hot at the beginning when we heard Doris Burke might not be long for her job heading into the finals. But Breen followed that up by saying that even just during this series between Indiana and Oklahoma City, he felt like they grew a lot and they got the reps that a good booth needs. So that felt interesting, whether you agree or not, that Breen would go on the record with those comments to stand up for his partners here. But what do you think? Buying or selling Breen, Doris, Richard Jefferson, Game 1, NBA Finals 2026, are they on the call?
I don't think so. So I guess I'm selling. I don't think that Doris Burke story coming out when it did was a coincidence by any means. I think Mike Breen can say whatever he wants. I don't think it's a very good booth. I think even if you look at Game 7, there was that moment late in the fourth quarter where they're reviewing a potential flagrant foul and Richard Jefferson's just talking to himself about it. And he calls attention and says, I guess I'm just talking to myself. I mean, this booth has negative chemistry at this point. I'd argue it might've gotten worse throughout the finals. So I don't think it's going to stay together. And I quite frankly, I think that's the right move.
Okay. So I don't disagree. It's not where it should be. I'm not going to let one finals change that. And there is a sunk cost at a certain point where you're just devoting, well, they need more time. Well, what if they just don't work and you're giving more time to something that's bad, and then you're compounding the problem. I think that absolutely could happen. I don't know if the chemistry got better interpersonally. Like it's still awkward a lot of the time. It doesn't feel like these people get along well. I think the one thing, and not that they get along poorly, but they're not friends or close or playing off of one another. They don't seem to like see the game and appreciate the rhythms of it in the same ways. All the things you need to do, like Buck and Aikman have, for instance, right? I think one thing that gets undersold here though is that there's always around this time of year the highlights that people will post of key iconic moments of other finals, right? And the one that caught my attention as far as like a broadcasting standpoint is 2013, the Ray Allen shot in Game 6. And as the Heat, they don't have a timeout on that, or the Spurs, the Heat don't have a timeout as they run the ball up for what will eventually be the offensive rebound in the corner three that Ray Allen hits to send that game, I believe, into overtime, and then obviously Miami ends up winning it. Breen says, just almost reactively in that moment, he's like, what do you do here? Maybe they did have a timeout and he's asking, do you call one? Whatever it is. And Jeff Van Gundy picks it up as if he's a second play-by-play guy. And he goes, you don't have time to draw something up. You just have to trust your play. But like the biggest play in like the 2010s in NBA history is happening. And they have the level of chemistry to patter off of each other, trade off the blow-by-blow, and still give Breen space to deliver the call we all know and probably have memorized, which is, rebound by Bosch, back to Allen for three, bang, whatever. Like, that's the type of thing that you just have to, like, as much as we can all be mad at ESPN, you kind of just have to cycle through stuff until you find that. They had it. They got rid of it. They were idiots for that. But, like, you kind of just have to keep churning until you get there. The problem for me is, and I'll sell it too, I don't think that this is going to be the booth next year, but I love Tim Legler. I don't have a good reason to believe that missing ingredient is going to be there with Tim Legler. I don't know if Richard Jefferson and Tim Legler are going to be able to achieve that in one season. I don't know if Tim Legler and Mike Breen even have any sort. They've never really called games together. So I don't know. It's this really weird spot to be in, and chemistry, it can be saved, I guess, if you just have a superstar in the booth who's just nailing it and amazing at their job. Maybe that just saves them. We've talked about those names over and over, but I could say this one didn't work, but I also can't say the next one will.
One, the biggest play of the 2010s was LeBron James's block on Andre Iguodala. So we'll correct the record there. Two, I really don't want to see another three-man booth. Or at least I don't want them married to the idea of a three-man booth for the sake of a three-man booth's sake. And I guess the issue there would be just based on the reporting, or at least on Andrew Marchand's reporting, like they seem pretty committed to keeping Richard Jefferson in the top booth and re-signing him. And so the optics definitely wouldn't be great if you just kick Doris Burke to the curb, especially because she definitely got a raw deal based on the way that everything played out with Doc Rivers and then JJ Redick. So maybe, I don't know. I don't think ESPN's like in the business of being fair about these things, but I also don't know how you could make that move of just basically demoting Doris Burke and keeping it Mike Breen and Richard Jefferson. The other thing is, I know I harped on like that moment where Richard Jefferson was talking to himself during the review, but that was something I really picked up on, I think, throughout these playoffs. Something about this three-man booth, this three-person booth, is they argue a lot of calls with each other. Oddly, Mike Breen seems involved a lot. A lot of times it's one of the analysts saying what they think, and then Mike Breen in his very straightforward way kind of giving a dissenting opinion, and they just haven't earned that chemistry to argue. Like they don't bicker in a way that Jeff Van Gundy and Mark Jackson were capable of, or that Buck and Aikman are. It's really an awkward way they tend to disagree with each other, and it tends to happen a lot.
That's the thing. Like they don't. That is the thing I was going to say. It feels like it did get better just in terms of the course of the action of the game. Is I feel like RJ deferred to Doris better over the time, and just frankly had less to say, as much like he kind of humbled himself or sacrificed or whatever you want to call it. And that helps. But you're right. When there is a momentous moment in the way that I was mentioning with the Ray Allen shot or anything, the previous booth, Jeff Van Gundy's word was gospel. Like that was the end all be all. And you kind of have to have that in those huge moments. It has to be what's the thing that the audience is looking for, and what's the thing that's going to kind of off-ramp you away from those moments. So, yeah, I mean, it could be Breenan Legler, it could be Breenan Jefferson, it could be Breen Doris, I mean, or some other third person we don't know yet. I don't have a great idea, but they don't seem happy with this, and I would agree it's not cutting it. Okay, keeping on the ESPN production and coverage of this series, this season. Buying or selling Stephen A. Smith actually being gone from NBA postseason coverage on ESPN and ABC, because Inside the NBA is here, and by playoff time next season, when ESPN is licensing that show from TNT, our understanding is that'll just be the show. During the regular season, it'll have its nights off where the NBA Countdown group is still on air, but during the postseason, it's supposed to be all Inside. Do you believe, given how much Stephen A. shoved himself into the front and center of this at every single chance that he had, that he will actually agree to that, and we will not see a trace of him during the finals next season?
There's no way. I think I'm selling that one too. Yeah, I don't. Well, just for what he makes, for somebody to make $20 million a year, like it's not just to host First Take. It's not to be a part of Monday Night Countdown. Like you're going to be a part of one of your biggest packages. So I don't know what that looks like, because I also am somebody who's of the mind that ESPN is not going to tinker with Inside the NBA, or at least foist talent like Stephen A. Smith on the Inside the NBA crew. Maybe it's like non-traditional in a way that like First Take precedes Countdown or something, like a version of First Take. I don't know. Like I have a hard time believing like the Stephen A. Smith's only presence around the NBA playoffs come next year is just going to be hosting the show the day after in the form of First Take. I can't see it.
I tend to agree with you. I don't exactly know how they'll do it. I will just point out that even if one of the things that I think has gotten lost through the cracks that will bleed into the next person I want to bring up here is that if you watch Inside pregame, especially, they have like correspondence. They'll do a hit with, Chris Haynes or whoever the sideline reporter is, or some personality from around, even maybe like, the color analyst that night or whatever. So that's going to be an opportunity, and it's going to be ESPN talent, because ESPN's doing the game. So, maybe that is Richard Jefferson, or maybe it is, I guess, Lisa Salters, or maybe it's somebody like Stephen A. Smith, right? And so I think that could be a place for it, especially when you're talking about the biggest games, conference finals. But I would probably sell that he's gone as well. The other person I was getting to, though, is Scott Van Pelt, because this year, strangely, for the first time, they decided, hey, why don't we bring Scott Van Pelt to the finals like he does his Sports Center from the field of wherever Monday Night Football is being played on Mondays. Let's have him do that from after each game of the finals. And he did a rotating cast of people like Stephen A., players and coaches from the teams, reporters, analysts, whatever, from the ESPN, tree of people who are covering the sport, the series in person. And SVP said something in an interview a while back that I covered for Awful Announcing, where he talked about wanting to basically be that exact thing, some kind of correspondent, doing the interview that gets aired on Inside that maybe then Chuck reacts to, or something like that. I think it'd be a big missed opportunity to not incorporate him in some way, especially if he's open to being a team player like that. And that was just such good content after these games. I can't imagine getting rid of that.
Well, the other thing is they will have Flagship, or what I'm still calling Flagship, the ESPN ESPN, the streaming service. And so
Yeah.
that's actually, now that I think about that, like I go much harder on the Stephen A. Smith sell, because all indications are you just look at the Pat McAfee and Rich Eisen stuff. They want to give viewers a choice. Like I think they're going to give you the choice of, hey, if you want to watch SVP, you can tune into the ESPN streaming service, or maybe vice versa. Maybe it works better given the time restrictions of everything with inside the NBA and the concerns there. But I think the goal will be you can pick and choose. You can watch Stephen A. Smith, you can watch Scott Van Pelt, you can watch Inside the NBA. So I do not think there will just be one standalone post-game show, whether that's a version of Countdown or Inside the NBA or Late Night with Scott Van Pelt. Like, I think you're going to have options here. So I still think, even though Inside the NBA plays a huge role in all of this, like, I don't think ESPN is just going to move on from any of these talents' responsibilities when it comes to their own NBA coverage.
Okay, so we've sold two things here. Let's get to our third. And it's related to the licensing deal we were just talking about. Inside the NBA will salvage ESPN's coverage. And this is one in the same, hand in hand with the question we just asked, but I think we're more talking about from a fan standpoint, right? Mm-hmm. Because there was so much negativity to the point where people were feeling like big moments, Halliburton's game winner in game 1, his injury storyline, whatever it might be. Jalen Williams' 40 piece in game 4, all these things were almost being tarnished a little bit by the coverage that came after it, or lack thereof, or whatever. Do you think that when we're talking about this, the energy, the bigness, I don't know what to call it, that we want from these moments, will Inside help that? Will it make us feel more like that is happening on ESPN's broadcast than we do right now?
The aura.
Yeah.
Isn't that what you kids say? It's I will hesitantly buy here, because I am a little skeptical of the entire Inside the NBA ESPN partnership from the standpoint of, it's not as many games as people think. Like, it's not, you're not going to be tuning in to a random game necessarily in February, and those guys are going to be there. Like, this is a pretty limited deal. But if it does include the entirety of the playoffs, which is like 2 full months, maybe a little bit longer at this point, that's like what people will remember. That's what they'll ultimately be judged on. We don't judge the Jefferson, Green, Doris Burke booth based on the regular season. We judge it on the playoffs and the NBA finals. And so, like, as long as this is inside the NBA throughout the entirety of the playoffs, and it looks every bit like inside the NBA as we've been accustomed to, which I know is a big question, and that you and I are on opposing sides on, then I do think it could salvage a lot of the complaints we've had. Because even taking the broadcast booth out of it, like, I think a lot of the complaints have predominantly been about the pregame, halftime, and postgame shows.
I actually think it's going to be a really new thing for everybody, us watching it and them doing it. Like, they've never had the finals. I don't know if like people have necessarily thought about it from that angle, but we think of Inside the NBA as being the premier studio show accompanying the NBA, right? That's the one. But it's really because of its longevity and the people involved and their stature and the amazing way that show has come together over time. But it's not because it's been on these major games. They get the conference finals every year, but what is it going to be like when their show is so it's soaked in making fun of each other, shooting the shit, goofing around to a degree? They have their favorites and their basically enemies in the NBA. I think it could look like the way that Shaq and Chuck in particular just turned the 2023 finals into a love fest for Nikola Jokic on the NBA TV set. Mm-hmm. That was a good example. I think where it was like that made it feel cool. Like, wow, this is Jokic's crowning moment, and these guys are a part of it because they are, the guys who kind of, they're part of the group that's going to bestow that upon him, or whatever you want to say. But there also could be a situation. What if it's a shitty finals next year? and they just make fun of it the same way that everybody else did on ESPN, or make light of it, And I think we could kind of be back to square one. So I'm going to sell that they will completely fix the things that people have problems with about the coverage of big moments like this, partially because I think that they contribute to those problems that people have. So I can't imagine that they're just going to fix it, even if people like the show more.
Yeah.
All right. Let's get into the series itself. Some of the things that were being discussed. So, let's talk about ESPN aura farming with its NBA Finals broadcast, Ben, to borrow a word that you just introduced to our audience here.
Butchered.
Yeah, well, there you go. They basically got bullied into doing more to generate that energy that people wanted. They are midway through the series started broadcasting the pregame introductions of the lineups. They filtered between a bunch of different logos on the court and eventually settled on, I guess, what they wanted to do there. And, there's still more. I think, like, the use of the cursive finals thing, people really seem to be obsessed with that, not just on the court, but everywhere in the branding. People have pointed out that ESPN still could have its old intro and outro NBA theme music, which I'd kind of forgotten about, that even used to be a part of it. Yeah. But again, these clips that go around this time of year, I was like, okay, I actually did kind of like it. It'd be nice if that came back. But they did some. Do you think that it helped? Do you think that stuff matters? If they continue to do more of that and respond to the fan feedback, do you think it will help raise the level of this overall product and make people happier?
I think so. I think so. I'll buy. I thought adding the intros was good. I thought that whatever happened with the court was just like too little too late. And maybe it seems like they're at a point where they're just like anti-decal and they don't want to put any giant decals on the court anymore. That seems to be,
unless they are getting paid millions of dollars for it.
Right. Exactly. So I don't know, maybe I'm missing an obvious example. I don't remember any massive injury happening because of a decal on the court. All of these things are moving to just LED lights anyway.
Yeah, exactly. They're projected. They're not even actual things on the court physically anymore. So
yeah. But I do think there is, because I've seen people roll their eyes and say oh, well, how many viewers is this going to add? There is something to the pageantry. There is whether you like it or not, pageantry is a part of sports.
Much better word than aura. I think we landed on what we should call it.
Yeah, and so but you're right. I mean, the money is what matters here, because even the reality of the finals patch no longer being on the front of the jersey, that's because they added advertisements and the Nike logo to the jerseys. There's no place to put it anymore. So, I mean, I think that's something I remember. When the Cavs made the finals for the first time in 2007, I was pumped to see their jersey with the finals patch on it. And I was pumped to see the Cavs court with a giant Larry O'Brien trophy. So I think that's something that fans get excited about. You should be able to turn on a game 5 years later and know that it was an NBA finals game. And I'm not sure you'll be able to do that with this particular series, unless you happen to pick game 2 when they were cycling between the hologram Larry O'Brien trophy. So I'm very pro pageantry in sports. And yeah, I think that it seems like one of those things where it just got kind of whittled away and whittled away and whittled away. And now we're at a point where it's wait, why do the in-season tournament games look more theatrical than the NBA finals games do?
They're trying to sell the new thing more than the thing that's supposed to matter the most, right? It is weird. It was crazy to hear Adam Silver in his pregame media availability before game 1 that he always does say that he effectively hadn't really thought about the disappearance of all that stuff. It's so it was not only frustrating to fans and remove that pageantry, but you didn't even notice it was happening. You cared so little about it that it wasn't even really a decision. It was just an accident. That was disappointing. But I will say that I buy it, but I think it's interesting. I buy that it does make for a better fan experience, but I will say it's this funny sweet spot that you kind of have to hit, right? Because I do think that the generation of sports fans that, ideally the NBA would like to pull more and more of to actually watch this stuff is like for instance, let's go back to the NBA or the MLB playoffs last year when Bob Costas just got clowned into the ground for like every time I watch the "It's not Stanton's fault" clip from last year, I actually laugh like way more than I should. And that stuff's corny to people. They don't want it anymore. But we talk constantly about eventizing things.
Mm-hmm.
That's what Netflix wants to do with the sports that it's going to dabble in. That's what every, live production is trying to do these days to get people to tune in instead of just watching, an Aiden Ross stream or whatever, right? So like I see it both ways. I think that stuff does make it feel bigger, but I also think if you go too far and you make it feel like the NBA on NBC in 1991, people think it's sappy. So I
Mm-hmm.
don't know. I don't know what the right formula is, but it has to be something. You can't just
Yeah.
saturate it down to being just another regular season game, which you're right, it kind of felt like at times. All right. Next one. The NBA was actually happy about this matchup. Do you buy or sell that? Because they got their game 7. I would say Halliburton, of course, let's just pretend as if he is going to play next season. In theory, they got a new star out of him. I think you would have to say the national brand awareness, name awareness of him is way higher than it was even before the finals, but especially before this postseason. And it was kind of found money because they already got their deal financially. So with all that said, in hindsight, do you think the NBA likes what they got here, or do you think they still wish it had turned out a little differently?
I think they like that they got a game 7. So I don't like, are we factoring in, are we doing this in hindsight?
Yes.
Okay.
We said beforehand, that's probably Adam Silver kind of talking out of his ass. But now, what do you think?
Yeah, I think this was a successful NBA Finals predominantly because it went to a game 7. I think you remove the game 7 from it, then it changes the entire conversation. And I think like I wrote about it a little bit for the Awful Announcing newsletter. Like, what can we learn from this rating? And I think it's pretty academic, like in terms of what we want from our sporting events. We want stars and we want stakes. And in absent of stars, at least in terms of mainstream stars, this gave us stakes, and it gave us the first game 7 since 2016. It showed out in the highest rated NBA game since 2019. The highest rated NBA game since COVID-19 was a thing. Like, that's no small thing. I think you're right about Tyrese Halliburton turning into a star, which is unfortunate because now you're going to miss that momentum as he recovers from his injury. I think the fact that this Thunder team was a part of this spotlight now, where like it doesn't matter if the NBA likes it or not, this Thunder team is going to be back. It seems like, I mean, I don't know if I buy like they're about to go on this run where they win 4 straight titles, but they'll be back in the finals. Like, it would be pretty stunning if they weren't at least back in the finals in the next few years. So I think the fact that now we're building up equity with guys like SGA and Jalen Williams, I think that matters. And so, yeah, I think all things considered, this was a successful NBA finals, but I also think it probably changes a lot of the conversation if this thing just ends in 6.
When you talk about the game 7 rating, the part of it that I thought was crazy, and we should just say it averaged, let's say, just shy of 16.5 million viewers throughout the game. It peaked at just over 19. I think it's telling that Richard Deitch had the detail there that it peaked in the first quarter.
Mm-hmm.
So if Halliburton doesn't get injured,
Yeah.
I think we're talking about it 20, 21, 22 peaking in, it was still really close, close enough that people weren't really going to turn it off all the way through the fourth quarter. And that would have been an even better number and obviously a much more memorable moment for what ended up being the result of the game, whereas it kind of felt like a foregone conclusion once Halliburton went down. All right, how is Oklahoma City going to win? Not are they going to win, but yeah, I think it's absolutely true that the Thunder, it's good to have this first taste with them because they're not going anywhere. You want to talk about aura? I do think the NBA is in a tough spot that the past 2 finals MVPs have been about the aura-less most oralists, there we go, superstars you could imagine. Jason Tatum and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. They're awesome. I love watching them to a degree, but they're not going to be what sells this sport to people. So that's tough. But
why is that with SGA? Is he just too quiet? Like I don't know. He seems pretty like swaggy and like, he's up on fashion and has cool shoes now. Like he seems like everything. Like he has. I think he has a fun game. I like the way he plays.
Okay. Well, that's cool. So does your son, and I respect you guys in the Axelrod household.
I'm a Jalen Williams man myself. Jalen Williams, like I love shooting guards. I love a specific style of shooting guard, and that
I'm sure I've told you, but
Williams.
J-Dub went to my high school, so I'm a fan through and through of his. Yeah, look, I think that to me it's a deeper thing in the NBA where these guys are just both in the media training and professionalism from a young age and the style of play. They're just programmed to be robotic, basketball efficiency, monsters, and to say and do everything about the team. And not every guy's like that, but a lot of the best ones right now feel like they're like that. Whereas compare that to Halliburton, who has the funkiest jump shot you'll ever see and plays really fast, and he's 6'7", somehow being a point guard, and he, posts pictures with women he may or may not be sleeping with accidentally on the internet. Like, he's just more
does WWE
goofy. All of it. Said he's on Twitter during the finals, even though he shouldn't be, because he has to check what angles are going on each night in the WWE world. So yeah, look, I think that's what it is. But to me, the finals were a success. I think if you had to kind of take a year and not have it be New York or Dallas or Boston or LA or whatever, this was a pretty good outcome. Okay, what's the last one we have as far as the finals? Other NBA news breaking during the series. This was a talking point where, to me, I was noticing it most with people like Pat McAfee just being like, how is this even allowed? And whatever. I guess it was a particularly busy cycle of news this time around to not only get this weird Desmond Bane trade that people had to find a way to talk about with Memphis and Orlando, who they didn't pay attention to last year if you're in the national media, and then, of course, the KD trade. But not only that, also the freaking Lakers got sold. So it was like, it was a lot. But in general, I'm selling that this distracts from the finals in general because I just don't think it's usually this busy. And sometimes that's just how things fall. We've had it happen in the NFL world at times. With coaches or players, destinies and where they're headed. It's kind of just is what it is. And as we just talked about, Game 7 still drew a pretty big audience, so I don't think it really mattered.
Yeah, I don't buy that it's a bad thing. I do think there's a way for the NBA to optimize this. Like, I don't think it's optimal to have Sunday be both about the Kevin Durant trade and Game 7, because that you're wasting a news cycle. Like, you could stretch this thing out. Yeah. I think one thing like the NBA really needs to do.
But hold on, what are the logistics of that? I should say, you tell Shams Charania you're not allowed to report this, or we'll blackmail you, or like what do you do to prevent that news from getting out if the teams make a trade?
Well, I think you need to shift the calendar. Like, I think you need to say no trade negotiations during the NBA finals. And I'm not like, again, it's not like, it's a shame that the finals game got overshadowed. Like, I don't care. I have enough bandwidth to follow it all and give me all the trade rumors. But I think in terms of like optimizing your own calendar, the NBA should study the NFL. And I know this has happened in the NFL before. I remember Alex Smith got traded during Super Bowl week. But Super Bowl week, like the NFL has turned Super Bowl week into this thing where that kind of thing can happen on top of the game itself. But like the fact that we go from Game 7 to the draft in the span of like 96 hours, like they need to stretch this thing out. Like they should. I would have the finals. I would have a week of trade rumors and talk. I would maybe do, I'm kind of a fan of doing free agency before the draft, maybe go into free agency and then do the draft. Like, you could really stretch this thing out over the course of a month or a month and a half, where they're just like cramming it into like a 2-week period here during a time on the calendar where it's there for the taking. Like, you could stretch this all out and own this entire space of the calendar between the start of the NBA finals and the start of NFL training camp. And I just don't think they're optimizing like the way we talk about eventizing things. Like they could really eventize their own calendar if they did this differently. But I don't, again, like how do you prevent the Lakers from getting sold? I don't know.
Sure. Yeah, it shouldn't work against you to have a Game 7. It shouldn't work against the attention your sport gets to have the biggest game of the whole season actually get to happen. And that definitely was how it went down. Yeah, broken record. I just try to limit my number of rants about this because I get genuinely upset when I start talking about it, but everybody in the entire world outside of the people who make money off of the season being 82 games knows the season should not be 82 games.
Yeah.
This is another thing that it would solve. And another thing, separately, would be Tyrese Halliburton's Achilles might be intact. That would probably be a good part of it too. But all right. I am, I think we're both selling that one, that was like some kind of huge distraction, but there probably are solutions that could be tinkered with. Okay. Looking forward. Or hold on, we got one nerdy one to throw out as I promised here before we look ahead. Podcasts. You wrote an article at awfulannouncing.com where you basically posited that the Ringer's live YouTube shows and podcasts post game after all these games and in between them and all that pretty much just became your stand-in for any other kind of television or traditional coverage. And I do think we're getting to a point where that content, whether you're getting it from the Ringer, like you said, or any number of other places, the infrastructure is there to have that really just be your source of content in a pretty constant way. Like it's not just an appetizer or a dessert for your NBA Finals coverage. It can be your only NBA Finals coverage. Are you buying or selling that is maybe I guess the way I would put it to you, since I already know you feel that way, is like, do you buy or sell that's an experience a lot of other people are having and something that the league can bank on?
No, I don't think a lot of people are having that experience. Although I did see like a lot of attention, and that might just be the reality of the social media accounts I follow. I saw a lot of excitement when Bill Simmons announced that he was going live after the game with Ryan Russillo and Zach Lowe. And so like, those aren't just like, I don't mean this like derogatory. They aren't just like podcasters. Like these are guys who were on ESPN. Like these are guys who like have credentials, have huge followings, like established reputations, all of that. Like these aren't just like fan podcasts. So like, and maybe they're the exception, but like, I do think as we get into this fragmented media space and as ESPN even begins to push people to their own streaming service, like, yeah, it's like, okay, do I want to turn on the ESPN streaming service to watch this countdown show that everybody seems to hate? Or do I just want to flip over to YouTube and watch Bill Simmons and Zach Lowe? Like, it seems like a pretty easy choice. I do think the barrier for entry is maybe a little higher for the general population than we might give it credit for. But like, I do think the Ringer especially found something with the way it approached its NBA coverage as if it, and I know that's nothing new in terms of the way a lot of these podcasts and outlets have gone about it, but the fact that the most prominent, non-ESPN NBA media personality and Bill Simmons has now fully embraced it. Like, I do think it could kind of be a jumping off point for it.
Aside from ESPN, I think you would have to say that, pound for pound or dollar for dollar or whatever, the Ringer has invested the most resources into NBA coverage. So the fact that since Simmons signed his new deal at Spotify earlier this year, they've really, really dived into video and live video for these big moments. It is, I think, only going to grow in the way that it can fill that role. I mean, I'm looking, after Game 7, they got 270,000 views on that video, and that's just on YouTube. Obviously, he has a monster audience on audio and especially on Spotify, which houses the show. So I would imagine close to 1 million people, if not many more, listen to that episode. Probably more from the numbers that have been out there before. So, I mean, if you compare that to SVP Sports Center, it's not getting there, but it's not so far away as this trend continues. So I'm buying it too. All right. Looking ahead, what else do we got here? Last one. Let's close here. Amazon and NBC. I saw this idea out there that, hey, they will, I think Richard Deitch put it out there that, this pressure is coming, that the competition is going to make ESPN better. I gotta say, I know that that's kind of a straw man to just throw Mr. Deitch out there and let his thing be our whole buy or sell here. But I think people have been optimistic that that can happen. To the younger blood that's going in at Amazon and NBC's production capability and their brand and everything. I'm selling this. I don't think that ESPN has really proven ever that the way that they broadcast any sport is going to be particularly influenced by how anybody else does it. They call themselves the goddamn worldwide leader. They don't want to call them that anymore, but like that's what they said. So no, I don't think that the first year of Amazon trying its hand at NBA coverage with Steve Nash trying to call games as a rookie in that booth is going to make ESPN quiver in its boots and try to overhaul its strategy here. I think that they have their own problems to deal with, and they're just going to have to figure them out separately.
Yeah, I mean, as we sit here today on Tuesday recording this, NBC just hired Grant Hill, who was in contention for that top spot in the ESPN booth until his name was brought up in reports, but nothing more than that. But like, he would have been a candidate for that, you would think. I think if that theory was correct, like, it would have borne out a little bit more over this hiring spree. Like, we haven't seen ESPN do anything from a hiring standpoint. And I know it's a little bit messy because they're the only one that's currently airing games, but we haven't seen anything that makes you think that they're going to react or change based on what NBC or especially Amazon are going to do. I do think they can be pressured. I think the pressure has to come from the NBA. I think the NBA has to be the one to come in and say, like, we are not happy with this. These are our NBA finals. We need more presentation. I think maybe like that played a role in why we started to see some of the changes that they did start to make over the course of the 7-game series. But that's what happened with Monday Night Football, right? Was ESPN had the rights. The NFL wasn't happy with getting this like mismatched group together in the booth and in the Booger Mobile and all that. So they just went out and bought Troy Aikman and Joe Buck. Now, we've talked about this 100 times. There's not a comparison to that for the NBA, but I do think it does show that if the NBA were to step in and put pressure on the league, on the network, that is somebody who ESPN would have to respond to and adjust accordingly.
I don't have anything else. I think that's exactly where we're headed. And I can't imagine that the league is thrilled with all the negative headlines around the attention being stolen by solitaire and whether Tyrese should or shouldn't have played on a calf that eventually blew up or whatever other nonsense was out there. A lot of Morris twin action during the daytime.
Still this week. There's two of them.
I don't want to be rude. Markieff is persona non grata in Phoenix because he threw a fit on his way out of town. So I'm sure that is making me a biased, opinionist on this part. But I don't get it. They were not famous or great players, and they are like
they're not great on TV.
Stars at ESPN right now. That came out of nowhere.
Yeah.
All right, hot mic. Something we liked, disliked, or just caught our attention, I guess, in the past 2 weeks of sports media. What you got, Ben?
So I mentioned I was binging Bill Simmons podcasts on the way back from Florida to Ohio. And one of the ones that caught my attention, and I already knew what it was going to be because I believe you wrote about it for Awful Announcing. Yeah, you did. Was Con Knipple is a huge Bill Simmons fan, the projected lottery pick out of Duke. And he went on Bill Simmons. They had like a pretty lengthy discussion. It was fun listening to it, knowing that Con is a big Bill Simmons fan, and obviously knowing that Bill knew that because Bill wasn't trying to like what do you do? Like say like, what's your favorite thing about me? Like, when did you become a Bill Simmons fan? But they had a really good discussion, and Con found his own way to like show that he is a true Bill Simmons fan. And he shouted out the rewatchables at the end. And Bill asked him like, oh, what's your favorite rewatchables? And Con kind of paused, and I got nervous because I thought it was going to be like, oh, I can't think of it right now. Like I thought maybe it would be like he was blowing smoke up Bill's ass. And he came back and said, I really like all the ones with Kyle Brandt. So probably the Rudy one. Like he wasn't pausing because he had to think of one. He was pausing because he had to decide which one was his favorite out of all of them. So I just, as somebody who listens to every Bill Simmons podcast, you kind of get used to the the rhythms and who he has on and the way the conversations are typically going to go. This was unlike any other Bill Simmons interview I had heard. He doesn't typically interview current athletes, let alone, 19-year-old draft prospects. So to hear Con Knipple and Bill Simmons kind of nerd out over each other over the course of a 30-minute conversation, that was a really unique podcasting experience. I really enjoyed it.
Two things to add to that. One, the giveaway that the long-awaited Timothée Chalamet Bill Simmons collaboration has been blocked by Chalamet's reps. Complete
Stupid.
Travesty.
Malpractice.
Yeah. Second, Simmons teased that as Spotify finds some more studio space around the greater Los Angeles area, he is going to return to doing interviews, and I am optimistic that will get us some good content. I don't care about him interviewing like actors personally so much, but
yeah,
I do think he does a good job interviewing NBA players and coaches and people in the league. So I would hope we at least get some of that. All right, I didn't really know what to do here, Ben. I'm not going to lie. I didn't have anything that really super caught my attention, and I feel a little wary of how to do this one. But what I will just say is to comment on somebody within our little space here in the sports media industry. I've been fascinated by this growing Andrew Marchand versus theme of content that has popped up, and I don't know what to make of it, but I just think it's crazy that we've gone from sports media being this niche industry that, places like Awful Announcing and a couple of people here and there are even doing or caring about, to suddenly, the typical Stephen A. Smith style monologued reaction to a feud or a beef on First Take the next morning after somebody calls him out or something gets goes awry with him and somebody in the space has become like at marchandsportsmedia.com. We're tuning in to get like the strange beat by beat of why I reported this about this media figure and why they're a little off in their criticism of me. We had it with Doris Burke and Rick Carlisle in game one of the finals, and then Pat McAfee with the Adam Schefter ban and all of that shortly thereafter. So it's not just, Stephen A versus LeBron anymore. It's Andrew Marchand versus Rick Carlisle. We got more beefs than we can keep track of.
I've wondered about this with ourselves too, because it's like sometimes people will take issue with the things we write about them and they'll call us out. And sometimes it's notable people. And sometimes it's like, okay, we're kind of part of the story now. Like we're kind of a sports media story, despite being a website that covers sports media. Like, it's like, where does it start? Where does it end? And I mean, in recent weeks, I've thought like, hey, do we need to like address this on the podcast? Like, do we need to talk about this? And I think generally we're both of the mind, like, hey, let's just like keep our heads down and let our work do the talking. But like, I do understand, like, if you're Andrew Marchand and it's like Pat McAfee calls you a rat on his TV show and you have this podcast, like, I do understand the desire to defend yourself or to address why you covered the Doris Burke story that you got. I also think there is, with some of the stuff, and I'm not talking about anyone in particular right now, like there's just a general lack of media literacy sometimes. And it's like, how could you report this using anonymous sources? And how it's like, because that's how some of this stuff gets done. Like, because that's the way Watergate broke. Like, not to compare any of this to Watergate, but so I get
the Adam
it.
Schefter band's not up there.
The Adam Schefter ban,
not comparable to Watergate.
I don't think so. I don't. Okay. Close, but not.
Close.
That was wild. I can't believe that was 2 weeks ago already.
I know we missed that. That could have been an hour, honestly.
Yeah.
That whole saga, but it broke right after our last episode, and now it's already old news. So here we are talking about it anyway. But yeah, it's funny. It is just how the media works these days. You got to have the response to the response to the response. We do cover it all, but it's funny. You're right. As far as when we're roped in, it's like sometimes I'll find myself writing about somebody's reply to our tweets.
Yeah.
And it's just like, this is too like Russian dolled, you know what I mean? All the stacking, and it's just, what are we doing here? But I respect Marchand responding like you do. It's just the the other side of it is the part that's interesting to me. The
Oh,
people who are more likely now than they used to be to respond at him as well. That'll wrap us up. Hit follow, hit subscribe. We're here for you every single Wednesday. We're also here for you at awfulannouncing.com with written content covering this crazy world minute by minute. Check us out on social media as well. X, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. We'll catch you next week.